point. Presidents have relatively limited powers. They don't have unlimited ability to define things. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it just seems like you can't just say, I'm going to repeal Obamacare or put a bill out there if you're not going to get the support of, let's say, a Democrat-populated Senate. I think that when we put forward our desire, our bill to repeal Obamacare, we have to have something to put next to it because people are going to be mad that there's not going to, that they think they're going to lose their health care somehow. I don't think to just repeal it is enough. I think we have to show something. Here's what we're going to do instead.
I agree. I think it's repeal and replace. But first of all, I think you've got to have as a goal picking up 12 or 13 Senate seats to get anything done. And I think next September and October, I mean, again, take Senator Nelson as an example. It's a very simple question. Would you vote to repeal Obamacare or not? And I think if he says, no, I won't, he's going to get beat. You know, and the same thing's true of Nelson of Senator Nelson in Nebraska. I mean, if he says, no, I won't, he's going to get beat. So I think you start with the idea, this is, see, I believe, as Reagan did, in a big choice election. I mean, I don't believe in elections that are 30-second commercials that attack the other person. I believe in elections that say, look, if you want to go in this direction, vote for this person. If you want to go in this direction, vote for this person. And I think then the country talks to itself for 3 or 4 or 5 months. The country makes a decision. When you win the election, you have huge momentum. I was with Reagan in 1980 when he campaigned on 3 things: defeat the Soviet Empire, liberate the American economy through tax cuts and deregulation, rebuild the spirit of the American people and American civic culture. When he won that election, he won it so decisively that we won control of the Senate, which nobody expected. We picked up 6 seats by a total margin of 75,000 votes between all 6. We picked up 33 House seats, which was not a majority, but the emotional momentum was such that we could get about 1/3 of the Democrats to vote with us. And so we passed, even though Tip O'Neill was Speaker, we passed the Reagan tax plan because we got about 1/3 of the Democrats. So I think if you explain where you're going, and I'll give you an example. There are about 200 or 300 pages of Obamacare that are pretty good. I mean, it's a 2,700-page bill. You'd have to figure a couple hundred pages are okay. Those things probably ought to be part of replacement. And you probably ought to be looking at what the replacement bill ought to be. But I think you start with the suggestion, first we repeal. What I would not do is have a partial repeal, because I don't trust the Washington staffs. And I don't want them to pick and choose which of the 2,700 pages that they will put. Way back in the back. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm just curious to know, Americans need to have some glimmer of hope. And what is being done right now to stop the stonewalling with the White House officials and the Department of Justice regarding Fast and Furious and now Solyndra? We're all law-abiding citizens, and this administration has been mandating huge mandates since he's been in office and expecting Americans to follow suit. What about political officials like himself to stand up and answer the questions he's being asked?
Well, look,
what is being done to stop the stonewalling?
Well, I think that the Congress has a number of tools it can use. One is it can force people to testify under oath because the Congress has the power to subpoena people. And the House ought to be doing that. So on Fast and Furious and on Gibson Guitar and on other things, they should be very aggressive about saying, you know, we're prepared to hold you in contempt and send you to jail. And that tends to focus people's attention. Second, they have the power to withhold spending. I mean, I would look very seriously, for example, at dramatically cutting the Attorney General's office as long as the current Attorney General's there, because I think he's a disaster. I would refuse to fund the National Labor Relations Board until they withdrew their suit against Boeing, which is an anti-right-to-work lawsuit that is enormously destructive of American jobs. So, remember, the president can veto bills, but the president can't force spending. I mean, if the Congress says, no, we're not going to give you the money, they run out of money on October 1st.
My thought was that if Americans know, could know and have a glimmer of hope that these people will be brought to justice. That was my...
Okay, well, I'll talk to some of the guys in the House, because I do think, in fact, they will be brought to justice. Yes?
Yeah, as we all know, the Democrats, they can't create jobs right now. So what's your plan as president to create jobs?
It's a good question. Let me start with what I said the other night. Presidents don't create jobs, just like governors don't create jobs. What political leaders can do is create the conditions in which entrepreneurs, investors, small businesses, the American people create jobs. So let me start with that. And I base mine largely on, I've been through 2 cycles of job creation. Working with Reagan, we created a wave of recovery in the 80s that, if you translated it today, would be 25 million new jobs in 7 years. So it was a pretty big momentum. Then coming back in '94 as Speaker with the Contract with America, we created a wave of deregulation, welfare reform, and tax cuts, and we brought unemployment down from 5.6 down to 4.2%. I pointed out the other day, just because I couldn't resist, that if you actually look at our records, because the last debate, they have been off on this, Huntsman created more jobs in Utah, So I pointed out the other night that in the 4 years I was Speaker, we created more jobs in Utah than Huntsman. We created more jobs in Texas than Perry, and more jobs in Massachusetts. Now the truth is, I didn't create them. The American people did. But let me just say, I have a 4-part plan just like Reagan. First is, I am for people who create jobs. I'm against class warfare. I think if you go out and create jobs, that's terrific. And if you actually make, and if you actually make a profit creating jobs, that's good too, because it sends a signal to other people they ought to go create jobs also. Second, I'm for very dramatic tax changes. I would go to 0 capital gains tax, which would bring hundreds of billions of dollars in the U.S. I would go to a 12.5% corporate tax rate, and I tell my liberal friends, we would actually get more money out of General Electric at 12.5%, because they'd fire half their lawyers and write the check. It would also liberate, there's about $1.2 trillion overseas that would liberate much of that and bring it back home. Our estimate is about $700 billion would come home of profits that are locked up by the 35% rate. I would go to 100% expensing, which means that you would write off, whether you're a farmer, a factory, a business, a doctor, any new equipment you could write off in 1 year. Very specific goal. We want Americans to be the best equipped, most modern workforce in the world. It's the only way to compete with China and win. So we're in a constant process of buying new, better equipment. Finally, I would abolish the death tax because I think that it is, in fact, a culturally very destructive tax. The other 2 areas are, I would favor strong deregulation. I would repeal the Dodd-Frank bill immediately. It is a terrible bill that's killing small business. I would repeal Sarbanes-Oxley, which has added a huge layer of regulation with produced no useful information in 2008. I would modernize the Food and Drug Administration so that the 21st century FDA had the job of being in the laboratory and accelerating new science getting to the patient, not slowing it down. And I would replace the Environmental Protection Agency with a brand new Environmental Solutions Agency designed to cooperate and be practical and take the economy as well as the environment into account. So that'd be examples. Lastly, I am very much for American energy.